All right, now that I'm in the mod kit, I'm going to go to workshop, create the mod. New level, basic. In British Colonist video, he says to delete a few of these. I'm going to leave these for now and adjust these after, because you can technically use them. Whether I end up using them for this map, I'm not sure yet. But it'll just make the editor look a little nicer. Like if you delete the sky atmosphere and the volumetric cloud while you're working on the project, you end up just working in a blank world, and I would rather have all of those there just to make it a little more visually appealing. I'm going to move the floor just like an inch and then hit save all so I can save this new level under plugins, UGC, and then I'm going to name it grind map. All right, now that we're on the map, I'm going to save all again. I'm going to add a new folder. I'm control scrolling. I'm going to make these a little smaller so I have more real estate. And make a folder called grind assets. And then in that folder, I will import the files, which were on this drive under Blender FBX. All right. Source location. Before I do that, I'm just going to double check when I did ruins if everything was in the same source textures. Ruins Blender. Yes, okay, so all the textures are in the local folder. How many are there? Right. Local folder, create new materials, import. All right, everything successfully imported, and now we have a folder with a bunch of materials, textures, and static meshes. What I'm going to do is first save everything, because the next part may cause it to crash. All right, now that we saved, we can start dragging the static meshes into the world. I clicked on filter and I filtered by static mesh to only have the static meshes. And then I went into here and selected about the first 1,000 meshes. If you try to place more than 1,000 at a time, it can take a very long time and potentially crash the editor. So once all of them place, then while they're all still selected, I'm going to reset their location to 0, 0, 0, because when you drag them out, it places them where your cursor placed, and so they're never lined up properly. And so I'm just going to keep going through that and drag out about 1,000 at a time by clicking one, scrolling down a bit, shift clicking. I can see I got 992 selected, and then I'm going to drag those out. And the last batch of meshes are in the scene. So now we get our first look at what the map looks like in Unreal Engine. So I've got my default starting floor right here. I'm going to delete that. And you can see we're missing a lot of textures. So this is luck of the draw almost. These textures do exist, but in Blender, these textures are, if I go to the layout, let's just choose this rock right here because I was looking at this earlier. So this is a QRCL cliff wall to dirt 1. And if I open this in the shading editor, we can see that it is a multiple UV maps and texture scales into multiple base textures. So we've got this texture, cliff wall 01M. We have another texture, QR ground concrete 02. This one, which is QR ground rocks 01, QR ground concrete 01A, cliff wall 01N. So we got normal maps and detail maps. So when using Blender, Blender has a very robust shader node system, all to get the final material output, which is what you see here, this rock face right here. Unfortunately, when exporting, Unreal can't cooperate with this shader node system. Unreal wants just a base color, a base normal map, roughness, specular, just the base textures. And so this 4-way blend is blending these 4 base textures into basically a new material. So this all depends on how faithfully you want to recreate the map going forward from this point. You might have a map where you don't need to redo any of these materials because they just used base CSGO materials, everything imported. So if I go to a different one, like this truck over here, this truck it actually does have a few different materials. It's got dump truck and dump truck A and dump truck C elements. So you can see dump truck A material is showing and dump truck C material is not showing. So if I go back to Blender and I fly around and go find the dump truck, we can see if I click on this and go to layout, oops. This dump truck was called Nuke Blank. So again, I'm not really certain how this works, but basically some of the static meshes, they'll have their textures and materials imported and rendered differently in Blender. So here it shows up, you can see, oops, this is supposed to be some sort of, corrugated metal. So if I free cam up to it, you see we got this metal texture right here. So I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna go back to Unreal, and I guess I'll use this truck as an example of the first thing we can do. I'm gonna go back to my filters and uncheck static mesh. And so I've got 2 materials for this dump truck. If I double click this material, this is just the base dump truck. It's got the texture and it came with a normal map. If something doesn't have a normal map, it's totally fine. All it needs is a base texture. So let's check out dump truck C and see what's missing. Okay, so something went wrong. So it imported a normal and it didn't import the texture. We're in luck that it imported the normal because we can see it's called QREXT Metal Grate 05. So if I click this button right here, we have 2 options. This is use selected asset from content browser, and this one is browse to asset in the content browser. So I'm going to browse to the asset, and it shows up right here as QR EXT metal grate 05. So what I'm going to try and do is see if that metal grate is already in here. So QR underscore metal, what was it called? Oh boy. All right, let me go back to this. Browse to asset. QR EXT metal grate. QR EXT metal grate. And here it is right here. And so it doesn't look like we have metal grate 05N, 05, 1 and 2. So it doesn't look like we have it. So I'm going to go to my folder for source textures. And I'm actually going to search in, first I'm going to search in the Blender grind file. And these are everything that should have imported with the FPX. So I'm going to do QR EXT metal grate. And then this one is 05 underscore N for normal map. So it doesn't seem to be in the Blender file. So I'm going to go to my source textures. And again, this is the texture folder that gets created when you use source.io at the very beginning, when we set in the scene outliner and we created a new folder called source textures. This will basically create a folder with all the textures found in CSGO and slap them all in one place, even if not even if it doesn't use it, but basically most CSGO maps are made by using textures from other CSGO maps. So like I've only done ruins so far, and so these are all the ruins unique textures. But when I did ruins, it used some textures from train. So in this source textures folder, there should be the texture needed, because if it rendered in Blender, it means it did pull it from source. And a lot of times source maps will use assets from other source maps. So on Ruins and potentially this map, there was a wooden crate called Pi Crate 1 that was used on Dust. And so to save on file space in source, you know, and the assets I think were free to use for map makers, you know, rather than make a brand new box and a brand new texture, they just used the same box from Dust. And so somewhere in your source textures folder that you created back when we first made the texture cache path should be this metal grate texture, which again is called, if I go to Unreal, it was called QR EXT metal grate 05. So that's what I'm going to look for right now, is QR QR EXT metal grate 05. Okay, so right here I've got the metal grate 05N for the normal, and I've got metal grate 05 PNG, and there it is. There's our missing texture. There's metal grate 01 normal map, metal grate 01, metal grate 04, but no, we want the metal grate 05. So for some reason this didn't import properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to grind assets, and I'm going to make sure I'm in the right folder so I can put it in the right folder, and just click and drag this, and it says importing done. So now I should be able to open this, get rid of this. I'm going to duplicate this one by clicking Control D, just because I know it's named the same. It should be right next to it now in the folder. So QR EXT metal grate. Right here, this one that's unsaved. And I'll plug that into base color. Apply, and I go back to the truck, and there's our missing texture. So you are going to have to do this for everything in the scene that is white. because it is missing a blended texture. Or just missing a texture. That one, I don't know if it was even blended or not. That one was just completely missing on import for whatever reason. So let's go back to working on this sidewall right here. So if I go back to Blender and go back to layout and free cam back over to here and open this one in shading, we see this one came with 4 different QR cliff wall, QR ground rocks, QR ground concrete 1 and 2. So cliff wall looks the most like this one. So that's the first one I'm going to try. I click on this, open up the texture, open up the material, grind assets, QR cliff. Let me see if I QRCL cliff. QRCL cliff, and it is nowhere to be found. That's wonderful. So what I can do is go to Blender, and I've got QR cliff wall 01. In this one, it lets me open up the materials. For some reason, that truck over there, when I click on it, it just said the texture was nuke blank. I still don't understand why, but at least this one shows us the shader texture that was supposed to be used. So now I can just go right here, and it's QR cliff wall 01, and I can just click open image, and it'll open the folder that it's in. So it's in source textures, Quarry world blends. So I'm going to go back to here. Quarry world blends. And it's the only one. And I suspect a lot of these right here in this folder are also missing. So open up Unreal, open up this, slap this in our content drawer. It's done importing. It's right there. Drag it in, plug it into base color, hit apply. And now all of our quarry is textured. So that's like one benefit, is that when you do apply it, it will apply it to everything all at once that uses that material. And so even though it might look like, oh geez, the whole map is white, this is going to take forever, it snowballs. Like you do 1 or 2 and all of a sudden your entire map's colored, because there might only be like 10 or 15 or 20 missing textures that you have to go through and do this. And trust me, it will be much faster than you think. So before I move on from this one, I'm going to do a little bit more work just to show you what's possible. So I'm going to go back, and this was blended with ground, and this was blended with ground rocks and concrete. So I'm going to grab this one next. Source textures quarry world. It was called QR ground concrete 02. QR ground concrete 02. I've got concrete 04, no concrete 02. So what I might do is, this is called source textures quarry. I'm just going to click and drag pretty much all of these in, because I have no doubt that I will probably need most of these. And I don't know if quarry is the file name for grind. I'm assuming it is, because I've got the QR empty fencing. QR quarry. All right, so imported a couple extra textures. Even if I don't end up needing them, that's fine. So I'm going to go back to our cliff wall material. Get rid of these ones. And I'm going to do a little work on this material before we move on. It was called QR ground concrete O2. I duplicate this one, change it to QR, oh geez, QR ground concrete O2. QR ground concrete O1, O1, O2 normal. QR ground concrete O2 right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a lerp, and I'm actually going to plug this one into this one, into this one, into this one. I'm going to make this flat so it's easier to see. I'm also going to add a scalar node. So you can either hold the 1 on your numpad or to get a scalar, or you can type in scalar parameter. Oops, not a scalar parameter. Just a constant. Okay, sorry. So either hold 1 for a constant 1 vector, or you can type in constant. So constant 1 vector will be 1, constant 2 vector will be 2 vectors, x, y, and then 3 vector is x, y, and z, which is also known as RGB. So you can also use this to create a color. But I'm going to use this node, constant 1 scalar, and I'm going to plug this into roughness. And I'm going to set a value of, see right now it's 0, and if you look, it's very shiny. You can see the buildings reflecting in the texture preview. And I'm going to set the scalar for roughness to 1, and now you see there's no reflection because it's dirt. Dirt is not shiny. The default value for roughness in Unreal Engine is 0.5. So on every single one of these materials, unfortunately, you will have to go through and set a constant scalar for anything that's like dirt or concrete of 1. And if you don't do that, your map is going to look like it's made out of plastic because it will be half shiny all the time. Now what you can also do is I'm going to add another one of these, hold 1, click, or I can click on this and Control D to duplicate. And I'm going to add this to the lerp. It doesn't matter. You can type it in right here, or you can add a value. It's either or. So with a lerp value of 0, it's going to use this texture only. With a lerp value of 1, it's going to use only this texture. And so what I want to do is I want to see the difference. So I'm going to drag this over here, and I'm going to move it and drag it around. And so I want to see what the quarry looks like when I lerp between these two. So at a value of 1, I'm going to hit apply. And so now the quarry looks very rocky and pebbly, like it's sand. You know, it's just like a sandy dirt texture. And with a value of 0, it goes back to being that kind of like carved stone texture. So then the question is like, which of these values, based on the blender, based on the original Blender blend, is, you know, the most accurate to the original interpretation? So you can either pick and choose one. Like you could have just picked the first one and called it a day. I'm going to see if there is a linear interpolate value, let's say 0.5, half and half. That maybe looks a little bit better. Okay, and so look at that. So at 0.5, you still get those little pieces of hard rock that are in the center, but you also get the sand as well. You know, the hard rock lines like that. So I want to add a little more rock. Which one was it? closer to 0. So instead of 0.5, I want to do like 0.3 and then apply. Okay, now we get a little bit more of those hard rock lines. I think that looks pretty good. I'm not going to spend any more time on this one because I've got much more materials to fix and much more things to cover. So I'm going to go through this entire map now, doing the same process. Okay, here's the other thing actually. I'm going to delete this. This is that world geometry tool skybox that was in Blender that we didn't need. So I'm just going to click on this bad boy and delete it. We don't want it. We're going to have our own skybox. The skybox for the map is down here. It's underneath. There's an exponential height fog right here. I'm going to hide it. And so here's the skybox for the map. Again, it's missing some textures, but once we retexture it, there's some windmills in the distance, and then whatever this is, sky dome fog. So there's some fog, and then there's some horizontal skybox. And so there's probably a texture that like shows the desert in the background. And then there's also this dome above us, tool skybox. We'll see if we save that one. But save this. You know, this is good. This will be a really nice backdrop. QR Sky Dome Mountain. That one, that'll be good. We'll get to that eventually. But for now, I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna just do the same exact process and try and figure out what the original material looked like for all of these. And you can see I've got all these white materials right here. Blend metal wall, blend rocks, blend puddle, blend ground dirt, blend ground. So all of these I got to fix. And you will have to fix too if any of your materials used Blender's blend node. So I click on the rock right here, I open its material, and there's nothing. That's great. So QR blend rocks to dirt. I'm going to open the blender, back to layout, free cam, shift tilde is how you free cam, and then you can click and it'll lock you there. Click on this one. Here's the dirt. Go to shading, QR blend rocks to dirt. All right, so again, look at this. Blend rocks decal. So it had a blend map, which again, maybe there's a way to use this in Unreal to lerp between the two textures. I have no idea how to do that. I might try. I might throw this into the lerp node and see if this does anything. So let's look at, okay, base texture. This is what we want to find. QR ground rocks 01 and QR ground concrete 02. Wonder if I can copy this and paste it into Unreal. And I want to add a texture, no, not texture coordinate, texture sample. And it picked one for me. So I can paste that in, and now I've got QR ground rocks 01. Apply. And if I tab this up here and go back, now I've got some rocks. Again, if you can see on a steep angle, it's shiny. Those rocks are very shiny for reflecting the sun. We don't want that. I'm gonna press 1, add a scalar, plug it into roughness value of 1, apply, go back to the map, no more shiny rocks. Now this was also blended with the other one, so what I can do is I can go back to this, open up cliff wall, and copy the lerp node. Go back to this one, and paste the lerp node. And then go back to Blender and figure out what the other one was. QR ground concrete 02, copy, back to Unreal, duplicate the texture sample, search, paste what texture it's supposed to be. Copy, paste what texture it's supposed to be. Concrete ground, plug this into the lerp. And a value of 1 is very sandy, a value of 0 is very rocky. Let's do 0.5 and apply. We're going to call it a day there and call this good enough. If we look at this rock, it was originally kind of like an off-white color, honestly. Like it's like a sandy, quarry color. What you can do is go to lit in Blender, and this is going to nuke your frame rate, but yeah, it's like a different shade. Oh well. We move on. Dead grass. We need some texture sample. No. Texture sample. QR. What's it called? Static prop. Okay, so here's the other problem. So this static prop has a material, but that doesn't show material. So I should be able to go off of just the name. So this is QRFR dead grass. So QRFR tumbleweed. Oh boy. So I threw everything from Quarry World in there. Let's look for QRFR dead grass. There we go. Also, QRFR tumbleweed. Do I have tumbleweed? QRFR tumbleweed normal, but I don't have tumbleweed regular. So where is this? In models, source textures, quarry. Didn't I import all these? No, I imported everything from Quarry World, not from Quarry Models. So I'm going to control all of these, go to my textures folder, and throw these in there. And some things will get re-imported, so even if there was a duplicate, that's okay. I'm going to save because I haven't saved in a while. Let's go back to our dead grass. QRFR dead grass M and tumbleweed. We want dead grass. Apply. Now, here's what we want to look at. Check this out. So these dead grasses are a bunch of PNGs like this. We don't want that. We want it to be looking like grass. So right now it's a flat texture. So what we want to do is click on the main material node. This is just your texture sample. If you click on this, you're going to get all the settings for your texture. You want your main material node. You want to change the blend mode from opaque to masked. That'll unlock this opacity mask. If you look before, opacity mask is grayed out. I go to masked, and then I click on the alpha channel and I plug it into opacity mask. Thank goodness that worked. And now it will mask away everything that isn't supposed to be the grass. So if I hit apply and I go back to the grass, there we go. Now our grass is looking more like grass. Here's another thing you can do. If you want the grass to show up and not disappear at certain angles. You go back to the dead grass, you click on the main material, and you go to two-sided to make it a two-sided material. Otherwise, it'll billboard, and if you pan around to the other side, there'll be nothing. See, now the grass is looking a lot more full because all the pieces that are facing the other way show up. So that was just the grass. Here's our tumbleweed. All right, before I go away from the grass, you can set, now would be the perfect time to set the roughness. Grass isn't perfectly opaque, you know, grass can be shiny, so I'll give it a roughness value of 0.8 and apply and close the grass. Now, time for the tumbleweed. Materials. So again, tumbleweed was the one where we had the normal map, but not the regular map. And now I re-imported tumbleweed, so now we got the regular tumbleweed. Base color, same thing. We want the tumbleweed to be opaque. So I'm going to click that, change from opaque to masked, alpha into the opacity mask, hit apply. And we might want to make this two-sided because if we go to this side of the tumbleweed, you notice some of it disappears. So I'm going to make the tumbleweed a two-sided material, hit apply, close it. All right, I want to fix these fences. I want these to look good. These are, click on the fence material, same thing. The normal map got imported, the base texture didn't for whatever reason. So I'm going to just duplicate the normal. Now I'm clicked on the normal, so I can go over here, fencing. All right, I'm gonna have to look it up. It's called QRMT fencing. QRMT fencing. And it's not there. That's just wonderful. So let's click on it in Blender and see what we got. It's called QRMT fencing, and it is in Source Textures Quarry World. QRMT fencing 01. It should be there. I could have sworn I re-imported that. QRMT fencing is not there. So let me go back to world. Here it is right there. Why it didn't import is a mystery. So let's take fencing. Failed to re-import QRMT fencing 01 material. So the fix for this, again, I have no idea why this does this, why it's so difficult. I'm just gonna do this, control copy, control paste. Now I pasted the exact same texture image in our source textures folder, and it's now called QRMT fencing copy. And when I slap this in there, it'll import just fine. Wonderful. Now I can click and drag it into here, get rid of this one, plug this in here, set the preview to plain. It should be a masked material, plug alpha into opacity mask, hit apply, and there is our nice orange fencing. And I want this to be two-sided. Two-sided. There's our nice orange fences, check them out. And just like that, this whole section of the map, if I'm looking over this way, doesn't have any of that giant white untextured, oh geez. All right, let's not look that way. Let's do this. QRFX dust plane 01. Let's see if we have a texture sample. I'm just gonna do this, I'm gonna copy, paste a texture sample. And it's gonna be called QRFX dust plane 01. And it's not there. So let's go into Blender. And you can click on it. It's translucent, but I just clicked on it and it is called nuke blank. That's just wonderful. So that means QRFX dust plane 01. It says it's a material. It's going to be in texture cache source textures. So we go back to source textures, QRFX dust, and I'm going to do the dust mask. Open up my content drawer, drag these into the content drawer. Importing, done. Wonderful. QRFX dust. I'm going to duplicate, and this one is going to be dust mask. Base color. Masked material. Now, I want to show this in real time just so you can kind of see, well, I guess I can do it with material preview. So this is masked like this. I could either plug alpha into opacity mask, and it'll look like this. It looks smudgy, okay? Looks a little funky. And if I go to this, you know, that doesn't look very good. Masked is a very basic way of making something transparent. It's good for things that just like this fence right here, where it's just solid cutouts, not gradients. It's either what is cut out and what's not cut out. This is like partial cutout, and it doesn't do that very well. So what you want to do is, let me just try translucent real quick and see if that one is any better like this. Okay, so that's option one. Option one is to use a translucent material, which is just like a more robust version of masked, and instead of plug into opacity mask, plug it into opacity. That's one option. But because this came with an opacity mask, I think we can use masked mode and plug alpha of the mask into opacity mask, and then it might do the same thing. Okay, no, it did not. Let's try plugging RGB into it. Okay, so now that made the whole thing transparent. So opacity mask, that didn't do it. Okay, so I think it does need to be translucent. And let's try plugging alpha into opacity for translucent. See, no, same thing. It's not cooperating very good. So I'm not entirely sure how to do this the right way with the dust mask. But what I do know is that setting this to translucent and putting alpha in the opacity mask works. And there's our dust clouds in the distance. I'm happy with that. No one's gonna notice, except the people that watch this video. Okay, after doing a bit of research, I found that on supported games for Source.io, CSGO only has partial support for models, maps, not all entities, textures, and materials. So what I'm assuming is that this just doesn't have full support. So, you know, it works, it does the best it can, but unfortunately, this is the best tool we have, and this is the best it can do for us. So, because it's not there in Blender either. You know, it's white. So what we're gonna have to do in this scenario, which I've done for a couple other things, is just pick something that looks good enough. So I went into the source textures folder and I typed in pipe. And so there's a couple different options. There's metal pipe 01. There's a couple of different ones, and there might be one that is the right one actually. So this one's called MTN pipe support. And I'm going to look for this one, QREXT pipe. QREXT _ pipe. Let's apply and see what happens. Okay, so definitely not that. You can see the textures are completely not wrapped correctly, so that's not the right one. Pipe insulated. QR ext pipe. Let me see if there's another one. That one, that one, that one. What was just segment pipe? No. So now is a good time to make our own material. I'm gonna hit the number 3 and click to make a constant 3 vector. Click on this. Make this a grayish. Hit OK. Slap this into base color. Let's make this metallic. Why not? It's going to be a bit rough. Let's make it a metallic of 0.7. And roughness, we'll keep it at normal 0.5. Let's see how this looks. A little too shiny. 0.3. There we go. We got some gray metal pipes. At least they're not white. And we move on. A palette. All right, this one will be there because there is a normal map, which means the texture's got to be out there somewhere. To our content drawer. And if it fails to import, we know what to do. Failed to re-import Q1 palette. Okay, so we go here. This is under source textures quarry. Palette M. Again, failed to re-import. So just gonna copy, paste to get palette copy, and then that imports just fine. Now I can do QR palette copy. Plug it into base color, hit apply, see how it looks. Looks a bit shiny because I didn't change the roughness to 1. Change the roughness to 1, hit apply, check it out. We got ourselves a palette. I'm going to clean up some of these older materials. I'm going to keep a blended one because I might need it later. Yes, hit save when I close these. And you should always save often. All right. I'm going to pause or cut the video, possibly a little head. You get the idea. You got to just find the missing textures. Where's Waldo these textures, okay? So again, this one, it's got the normal map. It doesn't have the regular texture sample. QR, ext, wall, concrete. Duplicate. Wall, concrete, O2. QR, ext, wall, concrete, O2. Okay, this one is there. That's nice. Is that the right one? Concrete O2, concrete O2. Yes, it is. Plug that in. Hit apply. Concrete's not shiny. Make this a value of 1. Plug it into roughness. Hit apply. And now we got a concrete wall. All right, I'm going to cut ahead. I'm going to work on this for a little while, find all of my missing textures. And if I need to explain anything beyond just going through the folders, trying to find the texture, seeing why it didn't import, copying it and renaming it to get it to import properly. And we're going to go through the whole map. This piece right here, that's another tool skybox. We're getting rid of that. Over here, this box, I'll go over that. I'm going to cut. Okay, here's another one I found when working on ruins is decals. So there are these decals in Counter-Strike, and when they get imported into Blender, they don't show up properly. And so this big billboard right here, if I show you, if I get rid of it, it looks like that. So it's like, you know, what is this supposed to be? And it's called QR Puddle Generic. And when I open it, it's got the texture and the normal map. You know, so it's like what is this supposed to be? And what it's supposed to be is a decal. And so I can actually change this from opaque to a translucent and plug alpha into opacity, and we'll see you get this like same thing like the dust cloud over there. We get this kind of transparent see-through, you know, cloudy bit right here. But if I now go back to this, it still shows it as being right here, but you can't see it. And let me turn on two-sided and maybe you'll be able to see it. No, still not. So what I've found is that a lot of these decals were supposed to be on the floor. Like originally they were like on the floor, and this one's called Puddle Generic. And so maybe, you know, whatever the player was doing right here, you would see a decal on the ground that looked like a puddle. And so maybe in this you can see. No, it's still not in here either. It's really weird. It's I could load up CS:GO and show the difference, but basically it's this little tiny decal. Like even though it looks like a giant billboard before I got rid of it, it's this teeny tiny little decal, which is why again you can't see it. So what do you do to fix this? Delete it. All right, literally no one is going to notice that this thing is missing. It was just like a puddle thing on the ground. You could spend hours and ages trying to recreate that stupid little puddle on the ground, and it's not going to matter. There's a million other things you can do to make the map feel and look a lot better, rather than fretting over that one little tiny puddle. And actually, before I delete it, I'm going to go to like this. I'm going to go to content browser. I'm going to find generic puddle, asset actions, select actors using this asset. And there are 55 of them around the map. All right, so let's see. Okay, I'm curious now. If I change this back to translucent and plug in opacity, do these ones show up? Okay, all right, that makes a little more sense. So look at that. It's like tiled. So it's like this weird texture that's tiled really large. And there's 55 of them around the map. So there's another one over here. This one again right here is so large though that it's like it's even difficult to see. And again, it's behind this chain link fence, which eventually we'll fix and make opaque, and it's outside the map. And the one over here, the one over in this warehouse, is also outside the map. Like the playable area, oh maybe not, maybe as you walk through the playable area there's just a little bit right here, so there's like a puddle on the floor. But 55 meshes, look, it's divided up into all these little rectangles. And so you're walking around this corner and the game is rendering 55 chopped up pieces of puddle on the ground that don't even look very good because apparently I'm missing something. I don't know what's missing, but it's missing a color, that's for sure. If I plug this into RGB. Now it kind of looks like an oil spill. That looks pretty cool. But that is not the intended design. So for now, I'm probably going to delete it is what I'm going to do. For now, I'm going to leave it, but this is the sort of thing that it's best to just, you know, delete it. Who cares? It takes too many draw calls to render out all these different squares of especially it's translucent material. Translucent materials are very expensive, and I will cover that after. Now would be a good time to go over texture tiling in UVs. So as you can see on this blend ground concrete texture, you can see the texture repeating over and over and over in each square. So if you zoom out, you can easily see all the squares, and especially on that one, and over in the center of the map, it uses the same exact texture, but it is already stretched on the mesh a little more, but you can still see the squares a little bit. And to resolve this, you open the material and you open up a texture coordinate node. And so you can right click and do texture coordinate. And if your texture has a normal map and a normal texture, you can plug into both of them at the same time, so you can scale both of them equally at the same time. And going down, like if I show you an example, if I go to 2 on both of these and hit apply, that tiled it the wrong way. It made them smaller, so we want to go lower. So I'm going to go 0.5 and 0.5. And then apply, and now you can see that it's much harder to see where the squares end up. And if I go over to this one over here, you can still kind of see the squares. So maybe I'll go down a little more. Maybe 0.2 and 0.2. So this is outside the map. It's harder to see. No one's going to be really looking at it. If you zoom out a lot, you can see the tiling, but over inside the map, now you got a nice concrete gravel floor that doesn't have any visible seams. Now it does stretch the texture, so if it's a 512 by 512 texture and you stretch it out like that, things like this little piece of gravel rock are going to look really pixelated. So maybe for the sake of the walkable area inside the map, I'll bump that up a little bit, maybe 3.5 and 3.5. Now the gravel looks all right. You can't tell that it's repeating, but it's also not wicked grainy from being zoomed in so much. So now may be a good time to explain blended materials and the problem between Blender, Source, and Unreal. So when something is made in Blender, you can use all of these nodes to make a really complex material to paint that material onto a mesh. And I'm assuming Source is able to read this and use it, because looking at this hallway right here in Source, this is what it looks like. It naturally blends, except maybe like right here you can see a seam, but it naturally blends. Out here it's gravel to dirt, and then right here it's dirt to rock, and over here it's rock to concrete. And so each time you blend one of those, you can make it blend from one to the next without having to worry about having a really abrupt line. And especially looking at this one right here, you can see it's like where a player might walk, it looks like it's walked on, but over on the sides, it looks more gravelly. And in Blender, I'm assuming the original map maker, did that. They painted on where they wanted each material to be in the blend, so it flowed from one to the next to the next. Unfortunately, with the tool we have, with Source.io, it didn't quite replicate that blend perfectly. It's like we're reverse engineering the map using a tool. You're never going to get the original map as good as it was when it was made from almost any tool that you use. So the best thing we can do is do the best we can. Now, Unreal Engine does have vertex painting, so you can do the same thing. You can add a vertex node to, one of your materials, one of your blends. If I got this one right here, you can add a vertex color node. Vertex color node. And I forget exactly how to do it, but you can link it up to these textures. So when you go back to this, you can go into mesh painting, I believe, and you can paint on the mesh where you want each material to be. That is your decision. It's whoever's porting the map's decision whether they want to go above and beyond and paint the textures on exactly as it was in the original. I personally don't have the time for that and think it's just too much work for what it's worth. This is it's a very small community that we're a part of. I'm gonna do the best I can to make the map look good, but something like that is, again, personal choice. Like if it's like a learning moment, yeah, you can paint on the textures. On Berlin Wall, I painted vertex colors on the flag, compared to the flag and the flag post. So that way just the flag could wave rather than the post. It's like vertex colors, basically it'll mask part of the mesh to do a certain thing. So it can be used for like almost anything to separate, just like paint on a part of the part of the static mesh, and then using that same vertex color as a node, you can then affect the material in different ways. So at least for this one right here, I don't quite like how it blends from, rocks to dirt, and then rocks, and then rocks to dirt, and then this one's ground. So what I might do is over here we've got this blend ground. It was ground and concrete together. I might just try and use this material. So if you click right here, browse to asset, now it's selected on that asset, and then by hand I can just click on this mesh and replace that material. And you can see it's the same one as this right here. It's this one right here is the UVs are a little different, but I didn't realize that until I just replaced that was that material right there. So I'm gonna replace that material so that way it looks like concrete all the way. And then what I'll do is this one right here I'll replace. And let's see about this one. What does this one look like? Maybe not that one. Maybe that one I can grab this material and place that there. And then how does that one look out here? Neither of these really blend together too well. But at least now, it kind of, you could always replace this whole thing too with this. It's like, I don't know what looks better. That looks pretty good too. But that looks also pretty good. So you know what? That is part of that. So I can't do that one. That's unfortunate. So that's a culprit of me merging those in Blender. So when I was doing the whole merging and splitting in Blender, I must have thought, oh hey, these two pieces are close enough together, I should merge them. And now that they're merged, I'm stuck with those together being the same material. So maybe what I'll do is I'll grab that material and I'll put that one here. So that way when you come down here, it looks like, those blend into each other. And that's pretty good. I think that looks all right. You just want it like uniform, whereas before, a couple of these squares were all different materials. They didn't really flow together very nicely. So it's just up to you. The other thing that I was a little disappointed in, if I go back to Counter-Strike, is some of these pipes. So over on the map over here, you'll notice a lot of inconsistencies. Like right here, this had a detail blend for like caution stripes that don't even show up in Blender either. Like those got lost, so it didn't properly export those. Over here, you got all these pipes. And so these pipes are nice bright orange, and then those pipes are white pipes. And outside, you can kind of see that those are supposed to be the same pipes. They go across the entire map. So if I go back to Blender and fly around, you know, these pipes imported untextured, and those ones imported untextured, so they weren't orange and white. And those are the same pipes that run all around the map on these overhead pipelines. But in Unreal, when I imported it, they all shared the same material. Corey extension pipes, no insulation, I think they're supposed to be called. So all of these pipes ended up being the same material. And when I go to that material, I was able to find a texture and it came with a normal map. And so I fixed up the material, and now that one shares this material. And this one is correct. If I go back into CSGO and go over to that pipe, that one is correct. So it needs to be a little more shiny, but that material is the same as the outer drum. But again, if I go back into Unreal, this one is called QR extension tanks. If I go to that material and then I slap it on here, that's not quite right either. So it's like they're not exactly the same material. But because these are all the same material, I can't change this to be orange, and apply and go, okay, no, now those ones are orange, they're correct. Well, now these ones aren't white, and now these ones are yellow. So I could by hand, and I might do it for these, is make a separate material and reapply materials to all of them. And it just totally depends on how well you want the map to look like the original map versus how well do you think people will notice, the difference. Like how many people actually played this map back on CSGO back in the day and will remember the differences. It's just about how much time and effort you want to spend on recreating the map to be as original as possible. But as you can see, it probably took me 7 or 8 hours, I'm being honest, to go through and redo all of these textures so far. And once I build lighting, and again, we'll talk about lighting a little later. Once I build lighting, this will look a lot better. Right now, lighting hasn't been built, so everything's kind of flat. So lighting does play a huge part in how things look. So I think as is, if I built lighting, this would look very nice, and I think I'm pretty happy with where it's at now, regardless of if these pipes aren't exactly the color they need to be, and some of these buildings are missing. Like over here, there was that caution stripe on the concrete, and this concrete, I used the right texture, but it's not quite looking exactly how it was in CSGO. But again, you pick and choose your battles. The most important things are that the map runs good, plays good. So I'm gonna call this done as far as redoing all the textures. Nothing else is missing a texture. This is supposed to be white. I think I'm gonna delete those puddles or maybe I'll work on the color of those a little more. But it's like a lot of things on this map were kind of like an off-white, like this shipping container and these barrels. Those are correct. This frame right here, yeah, that's correct. So everything so far except this piece right here is where it needs to be according to the original map and the Blender, what textures Blender says. So again, this is the last blend material, ground to concrete, that I need to do. And then we'll move on to the next step. The next few sections of this video are going to cover resizing the map to get the right scale, optimization, collision and phys materials, and lighting. All of these can be done in any order. You can go back and resize the map later. You can, work on collision at any point in time, do phys materials, but a lot of the shortcuts and movements that I'm going to do for one of these is also going to make it easier for me to just do them all kind of at the same time rather than going through them all once and then going back through everything and doing the next thing. I'm going to try and do all of them at the same time just because I'm going to have to open a lot of the meshes and change some settings. And so I would rather do it at the same time. So the first thing we're going to go over is resizing the map with the cube of resizing. So if you open up the map in CSGO or whatever game you're pulling from, go and find something that's roughly level with the player's height. So you can see this cone right here. I can shoot over it, and the top of the cone is almost up to the player's head, and I can't quite shoot over it. Also, this tactical I can go up to the light and it looks like it's about face level when I aim straight and true. So I want to get the Pavlov player model to be on a good scale with this. You could go around the map and find something else. It's like these are just a hair taller than the player if they stand next to them. So these should poke out just maybe a little above the player's head. I'm going to use these as my reference point. So if you go back to Unreal Engine, and in the editor you can see we have 7,000 meshes. I'm going to hide the sphere that I placed earlier and then go back up to the top, and all of these are in lighting folder. So what I'm going to do is grab this first one and add a new folder and call it map geometry. And then I'm going to place all of this into map geometry because it's important to stay organized when you're working on the map. So now I can close these folders. To the map geometry folder, I'm going to add a basic cube. Doesn't matter where you add it. I'm going to put it right here. And I'm going to put the cube in map geometry. Then I'm going to click all of the pieces of map geometry. And to just show you what would happen if I didn't do this, I can set the scale to 1.25, lock the scale. So when you hit lock, this will make it so it changes the scale for everything in the X, Y, and Z direction. So I want that to be locked. So if I scale the map up by 25% without the cube of resizing, what ends up happening is, this time it worked because I was centered on the origin. The way CSGO imports, everything has an origin of 0, 0, 0 rather than being placed where it needs to be. But what can happen is sometimes it'll make, if everything has its own origin, so like if you're doing, if you're importing a map from Call of Duty, the software works differently and it all have its own origin. If you were to increase the scale by 25% without grabbing everything and placing it under a single object, it will all scale up locally, and then everything will be just 25% bigger in the same exact location that it existed in before. And so you'll end up having everything clipping through each other because it'll just be in the same spot. So I just learned that you actually don't need the cube of resizing for this because all of them have the same local point right here in the center of the map at 0, 0, 0. But just in case you're working on a project that doesn't have that, I'm just going to show you how to do the cube of resizing. So you would select all of your geometry, and then you would place it under the cube. And it's 7,000 pieces, so it's a little laggy when you do this. Now that it's all under the cube, now you can take the cube and rescale it by 1.25. And then everything scales up the same relative to the cube. Then, once you're done and satisfied, you would click everything again, select it all, and then drag it back onto the cube. And then this would unparent it from the cube. And then you're safe to delete the cube. Now, I picked 1.25 because that is what I had to rescale ruins. So to check if your scale is correct, in the mod kit, you've got a custom map tools and a couple other things under plugins, and that's where your UGC. Your UGC will always be under plugins somewhere. Under all content, characters, NATO set, you can find an example skeletal mesh from the NATO set. And you can click and drag it out on the map. And if I were to undo, and actually I want to show this, and place the NATO, you can see he is quite a bit larger than the cone. And if I place another one and rotate him to the tactical, you can see again he's a lot taller. So if you played on this map without scaling, it would feel suspiciously small. So for ruins, I set it to 1.25. So I'm gonna grab all these. All right, so I guess the cube in this scenario isn't completely necessary because everything shares the same world origin over here at 000, which is where all these lighting and things spawn for Unreal. So any mesh you click on when importing this way all has the same origin. So scaling it all up by 25% without the cube is fine for this circumstance. So now if I place the NATO guy, you can see he's just tall enough to peek over this. And if I place him right here, his head lines up with this. I think I might have gone 1.3 on ruins. So let's go up a little more and go 1.3. One point three was definitely good for ruins, and I don't think going up any bigger would help because then the map would be just a bit too big. And so 1.3 is good because you go any larger, and if you see like the player model right here, this is where everyone would spawn. And you can see how tiny the character model is compared to the map. You're asking the player to run all the way down through mid. So it's all about scale and reference. Grab a player model and say, okay, can they fit through that door? The doors look a little big. Let's see the other one. We said in game this looked like it was a little taller than the player. And let's see, not that props are always to scale either, but you can always grab a character and move them over to something and say like, okay, is this scaled right? Does he fit on that forklift? And does it look natural? Not everything will be. There's definitely, I've seen pallets on ruins that were twice the size of a person, but without scaling the map, it wouldn't have looked correct. So that is how you rescale the map and then check your scaling. So I'm going to stick with 1.3. That seems pretty big. I lied. I'm going to try 1.25 for this map, and you can always change it later. You can always go back through and change the scaling of the map. You might have to move some spawn points around if you place those already, but 99% of your geometry will be under map geometry. And if you put it under this cube of rescaling, you can do everything all at once. So I think that's good. 1.25 seems pretty good. This map is already pretty big to begin with. I don't want to make it so big that it takes forever for players to rotate around the map. And I'm going to save. All right. The next thing I'm going to go over is lighting, just because I really want to build lighting and see what it looks like initially. You know, I'm tired of how kind of flat the map looks right now. If I build lighting, I think it'll look a lot better. So I want to build lighting real quick. I just noticed I'm still missing a couple materials and then the distance over there, but I'll get to those later. So what do you need to do to build lighting? So the first thing you're going to need is a light mass importance volume. So drag that onto the world, and then I recenter it at 0, 0, 0, so it's in the center of the map like everything else. And you can either scale the brush settings or you can scale the scale. So I can go, you know, 10,000 on this. And if you hit F, it'll show you the scale. So 10,000 is way too much. 1,000, zoom in, still pretty big. 100. All right, that looks all right. I'm gonna unlock it so I can adjust these individually. 175, and then another way to pan around something this big real easy is just look sideways and then hit F to focus again on it. I am gonna move it now that it seems the map is a little off center. Move it there. You just want this to cover the entire map. And so what a light mass importance volume does is if you try to build lighting without it, it'll give you a little error saying no light mass importance volume found. It may take longer to build lighting. And so this basically tells Unreal, where is your playable map? Where do you want to focus the lighting on? And without it, it'll take a lot longer to build lighting. And this just tells it, hey, focus on this. This is where the important stuff is. And you just want it to just barely cover your entire map. So I think I'll go 175 on this. Scoot it over a little more. Also, an easy way to fly around the map is just use the scroll wheel. So when you're holding right mouse button and flying around with WASD, you can scroll up on the scroll wheel to go faster, and then scroll down on the scroll wheel to go slower. So you can get some fine adjustment. All right. And then I'm gonna focus this way and scoot this back this way a little. And that looks pretty good. Okay, next thing you're going to need is a reflection capture. There's sphere and box. I'm gonna use a box reflection capture because that shape will fit over the map a little easier. You can use either one. Again, you just want this to cover the entire map. I think I'm going the wrong one. There we go. And that's covering the map. And if I zoom, see this one, if I hit F to focus, it focuses on the little widget in the center. Scoot that over. And that looks pretty good. Now, what does the reflection capture actually do? So at a bare minimum, you need one. You need one reflection capture. Otherwise, the characters' guns will show up funny when you're holding them in game, and there'll be a lot of like weird visual artifacting. There'll be a lot of like broken shadows. What a reflection capture actually does is, let's say on your map you have like a piece of metal, like it's a shiny piece of metal or a puddle on the ground that you want to have reflecting. So what a reflection capture does is it adds pre-compiled reflections. So rather than like ray tracing reflections, like in certain new games, how reflections were faked back in the day would be to use reflection capture boxes. And so what you can do, like if you had a map and you really wanted some like fancy, I don't know if there's any glass windows on this map. Like there was like a couple that I saw when I was in Blender, like one single glass window. But let's say your map had some glass windows. It had some, areas with some really shiny metal or some puddles or water that you want reflections. What you would do is you would grab one of the reflection captures, and let's just say in this room right here, I want some reflections off of some of this metal, some of the lights, some of the lockers. What you would do is you'd grab your box reflection capture and you'd place it in this room, and you would kind of have to figure out where the box is. So I'd zoom under the map, and then scale it down 500, maybe 700, and then place it in the room. And so what this would do is this would tell Unreal, when you're building lighting, that hey, we want in this room to calculate reflections. Every box reflection will have its own reflection captures calculated when you build lighting. And so I'll leave this one in here and just see what happens. I think maybe I'll open up this material and metallic. So roughness, I'm gonna make this like 0.8, and I'll add some metallic to this, maybe some 0.4 metallic, just to kind of show you what it would look like if you had a couple materials and these lockers right here. Same thing, I'm gonna add a little bit of metallic to these lockers. Default metallic is 0, default roughness is 0.5. That's why if you don't adjust roughness on anything, your map will look like it's made out of plastic, because everything will be half shiny. But it's not half shiny in the sense of metal shiny, it's like more like a plasticky shiny. But you do want some of that plasticky shine when you're doing metal. If you have full metallic, and let me open up, I'll open up this one and show you. If you have, and you should experiment with all these different material values. If you have 0 roughness and full metallic, you end up with something that is a really shiny metal. If you have full roughness and full metallic, you'll end up with like a dull metal. So if I just quickly replace the base color of this with a gold color, you can see full metallic with full roughness ends up looking like a dull gold. And as I slowly go down in roughness, it starts getting shinier and shinier. Now you kind of have like at default roughness, full metal, you kind of have like a Christmas ornament shininess, but then at 0 roughness, you end up with a polished. Also, you can see the reflection in this. So if I go to 0.5, no reflection. If I go to 0, now you get full reflection. So metallic is more metal, but roughness is like how shiny is it, and how much reflections will there be. So in this preview scene right here, it puts a building in the background with like a parking lot, and so you can preview what it would look like. in the material. So maybe we want these lockers to be pretty shiny. We want some reflections in them. 0.2, 0.1, maybe 0.2. And they're metal lockers. What happens if I go 0 metal on them? See, now it's like a plasticky shiny, so it does reflect. So let's go 0.8 on the metal. And let's plug our original color back in. See, now we got that metallic with reflections right there. And let me do that with the... We'll just start with the lockers for now. So back to the map, what else do we need? So if I go and click on, and another reason it's good to have folders, if I go up and I click on map geometry up here, I can quickly close it. And then lighting, we added some box reflection captures and the light mass importance volume. I'm going to move those into lighting. Directional light, it should be set to static. It doesn't have to be, but for performance reasons and for what we're doing, we're just going to have static lighting on this map. You can make dynamic day-night cycles. That's a whole other thing, and it's best done with blueprints rather than having real dynamic light. Exponential height fog, set it to static, and I'm going to leave it. Light mass importance volume, that's good. Sky atmosphere, set it to static. Sky light, set it to static. Sky sphere, set it to static. Volumetric cloud, set it to static. Now, volumetric cloud, you probably don't want it. So if I hide it, it's those clouds. It's better to have a 3D sphere background like the sky sphere. And if I hit F to zoom out, it's your sky sphere. It's a giant sphere out in the distance. So it's best to go find an HDRI off the internet that has like just a PNG of clouds in the sky rather than resorting to using your volumetric cloud. Because even though it's static, the clouds do still move. So those clouds are moving in the distance, and it will cause a performance impact, not the biggest, but we're trying to get this map to be as smooth and as optimized as possible. I leave it in until the very end, just because in the editor I want to see the clouds. I hate having, like, if I get rid of sky sphere and volumetric cloud, editing a map like this just feels really dull. I'd rather have them active. So I'm gonna leave them in for now, set them to static. Okay, now what else do we need for our lighting? At a bare minimum, that's all you have to do. I'm gonna build lighting and see what it looks like, because again, this warehouse, the roof technically doesn't exist because it's a one-sided material. If you go into the building, you can see, the players can see the roof. So what I suspect is, I think it means the light will shine down into the building. We will see. So I just want to build lighting just to kind of see what the map looks like. I'm going to save. So I'm going to start by building lighting in preview. So if you go to build and lighting quality, it should default to preview the first time you open the editor. And so I'm just going to build lighting only. Okay, lighting has finished building. Now you may get a lot of errors, like object has overlapping UVs. UVs are overlapping by 1.6%. Please adjust content. Unfortunately, there's no way around this. As far as like the way we exported the map and went into Blender and then put it in here. So you can go to this object. All right, so this one right here, and then I can select asset, select actors using this asset, and then zoom in on it. So whatever, this one said it had overlapping UVs. So I'm not entirely sure what the issue with the overlapping UVs, but for now it looks okay. And we can adjust lighting even further to make it look even better. later on. But I just wanted to build lighting one time just to see, what the map would look like. And, I'm pretty happy with this quarry over here. Looks like there needs to be a little bit more lighting inside these, which we can fix. We have these fences right here on these, and those look a little blurry. Again, we can fix those. This truck looks okay to start with. Looks a little dark over on this side. Where's our directional light coming from? So you can go to directional light, and if you look at the directional light where this arrow is pointing, and I'll raise this up and hopefully it doesn't mess up anything. So I'll raise this up and you can see the directional light where the arrow is pointing, and if I line myself up with that arrow, that is where the sun is in the sky. And so I can hide the directional light and it'll hide that light. So what do we got going on right here? Well, we've got this really shiny piece of metal right here. So what material is this using? Roughness 1. And it has a second material. And this material does not have a roughness of 1. So I'm going to add a roughness of 1 and apply. Now, if I rebuild lighting, which I might do that real quick just to see if that fixes the issue. Okay, so adding a roughness value to the other material did not fix the lighting on this piece of metal, but I have a suspicion of what will. So I'm going to go over this once, and then I'm going to go over it again in detail a little bit later. But if I click on this mesh, and I've got two options. I can either go click on the static mesh right here to open it, or if you want to find it in the content browser, you can hit Control B to browse to that asset, and then click on it. And this will open up the static mesh editor. And you have a lot of options, and I'm going to scroll down to lighting. Where's lighting? General settings, light map resolution. So right now the light map resolution on this is 64. And so basically, we're going to cover it in depth right now. If I go back to my UGC, I've got this new thing right here called grind map build data. And it says disk size 287 megabytes. This is your light map data. You can find all the light maps in world settings, and then there is some way to find all your lighting files in the world outliner or general settings after you built it. It's not really useful to go and find them, but if you want to, you can. So if I go to view and under lit, I go to lighting only. This shows you your light bake. So it shows everything in grayscale, and it just shows the shadows on everything. And so again, we've got something going on with this, and we're not entirely sure why. And so I have a second hunch, maybe even a third one. So it could be that our box reflection capture, no, that's high enough. And our light mass importance volume, that's high enough. So I don't think it's either of those. So I think it is the static mesh editor. So our light map size is 287 megabytes. When you build lighting in either preview, medium, higher production, that does not change the file size of your final lighting build. Again, no matter what quality you build lighting in, your file size for lighting will be the same size. What that does, what building in a higher quality does, is it just spends more time. It spends more time trying to calculate the lighting. How much light density you have is not affected by your lighting quality build level. It is affected by your light map resolution of every static mesh. So when I click on this tile right here, okay, this one's a good example. I'm going to change this one and I'm going to change that one to kind of show the difference. So this piece of tile right here covers a very large area, and especially the area underneath this truck. The light map resolution of this, now I can do the same thing. I can hit Control B to find it in browser, or once I've clicked on the static mesh, I can just hit Control E and it'll open it up. So now I've got this piece of geometry opened up in the static mesh editor as well. I'm going to go down to light map resolution. These need to be, I don't know if they need to be, but they recommend they be a multiple of 2. So I could do 64, 128, or 256, or 512. So for this piece, I'm going to bump it all the way up to 256. And for this girder piece, I think I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bump it up to 256. And then I'm going to hit save, and you can see it's going to save both of those static props that I just adjusted the light map resolution for. And now I'm going to build lighting again. What light map resolution does is it's how many squares, how many tiles on this mesh can you shade? You know, so imagine you took this mesh and you chopped it up into 64 different zones. That's why right here, this shadow looks blocky. It goes over, up, over, up, over, up. You know, you're decreasing the resolution of your shadow. To get better shadows, you adjust the light map resolution in the static mesh. That is what will have an effect on your final lighting build data. So yeah, you could set everything on the entire map to 512 light map resolution. Your build data will probably be 2 gigabytes. You don't need 2 gigabytes of lighting data. You know, you want the file size of the map to be as low as possible. So it's a balance. It's a complete balance. These pieces over here out in the map in the distance, these are completely lit except for like a little shadow right here from this overhang. So, and they're outside the map. So it's like no one's going to care if, you know, they're not lit to perfection. So they can be 64. They could even be 32. You could technically lower these all the way down to 2, but they won't look good. So the default for most meshes is 64. And thank goodness, holy moly, you know, it's like when something like this happens and you don't know what to do, it really sucks, because the first time I ever built a map, I had no idea what light map resolution was, so I would have had no idea how to fix that. I would have had zero idea what the proper solution is to fix this. So let's take a look at this first. So you can see, look how crisp those shadows are. You know, it almost looks like a straight line now, because again, you're trying to create a straight line with squares, you know, so it's going over, up, over, up, over, up. But now that the light map resolution is so high, and you can see that cut right there, that's because this is a different static mesh than this one right here. These two are different static meshes, and so you have this weird funky line where on this one it's you know, a really big mesh, so it doesn't have much shadow data, and so a lot of it's taken up by these fences. And again, you can see, look at this one, the fences actually look pretty good. They look like nice soft shadows, but over here they don't look so good. It's just because this mesh, you know, has it's a different size, has a different light map resolution. And then you have resolution and density. So if you have a big mesh, if you have like a really big mesh and your resolution is low, then it's going to have a really low density. But if it has a really high resolution, it could have a, you know, a normal or high density. If you have a really tiny static mesh, like this one, also has 64, defaults to a 64 resolution. It's going to have a high density because it's a large resolution on a small object. And so to visualize that, you can go to lit, and optimization view modes, light map density. All right, so this is gonna look really funky, but it's basically showing you, and you can visualize it by color or by tile size. And so this one right here, you can see the tile size is that big, but over here, the tile sizes are smaller. The smaller the tile, the higher the density. So on this traffic cone over here, you can zoom in and see all these little squares. So this is showing you all of the squares that could potentially be shaded. So on this traffic cone, you can have a lot of shaded squares. But on this piece of floor right here, you don't get as many shaded squares because they both have 64 light map resolution. You know, this is obviously more than 64, so I don't think it's an exact representation, but you get the point. So what you want is, you know, if you come over here to this piece, this has a light map resolution of 64, and it's a really small piece, so it's going to show up as orange, which basically tells you, like, hey, maybe this one's a little too high. You could probably lower this light map resolution. Or if it's red, look at this little cap right here. Actually, that's a whole metal bar, but, you know, this is saying, hey, this is a really tiny piece, and if I hit Control E and open it, you know, it's got a light map resolution of 64. It probably doesn't need to be 64. It could be, you know, I can even change it right now. If I change it to 32 and hit enter and go back and hit save, it's still red. Okay, that's great. Let's open it again. Let's go from 32, let's go down to 16 and hit save. Interesting. That one's not changing. Let's go down to 8. Let's go down to 2 and see. Oh, you can't go to 2. 4 is the lowest you can go to. Interesting. So that one's not changing. But normally it will. Let's go back to 32 on this one. Let me see if I can find something else that'll change. So you can see we changed this piece over here, and you can see the difference in tile sizing. This one has, you know, a lot of dense tiles, and this one doesn't. So this one right here, let's try opening this one and see if it takes. If I go from 64 to 256 and I hit save and I open it back up. It should change. It might only change after you built lighting. So like I might have to build lighting again. But I'm gonna close a couple of these tabs. The other option, you know, if you're lazy, and I'm gonna show you how to bulk edit a lot of these at once. You can also click this and scroll down, and there's an option for light map override. I think this one will change it if I do like 32. Yeah, see, it changes here on the fly. 64, 128, 256. So if I change it on override light map density, then it will change those squares on the fly. So I want 256 on this piece as well. I think the other one only changes after you've built lighting. So you don't want to have to rely on going through every single one and overriding. That's what I did the first time, and that's technically not the correct way. Like, you want to have them set in the actual static mesh by changing it under the settings. Override is after you've done that for everything. Let's say you're going around the map and you say like, okay, look at this little piece right here. It's red. You know, there's even 2 pieces right here. You know, I'm lazy, I don't want to open them both. I'm gonna just click this, override them to like 8. And see, now they're a turquoise greenish color, so it's like they're not red anymore. So what'll that do? That'll shave off, you know, a couple kilobytes of lighting on your file size. So right now, I think the lighting's in a pretty good spot where it's, you know, 300 megabyte size lighting. The lighting looks pretty good. So what you're looking for on lighting is like, does a few things look good? So it's like right here, yeah, this all looks pretty good. You know, the lighting on the sides of the building looks all right. we've got our shadows. What you're looking for is like anything funny like this. Now, that being said, you can go through and adjust, like this piece right here. I think it needed a little more light map resolution because it was such a large piece. It had this big truck casting shadows on it. So I wanted it to look better, so I upped the lighting density. Now, we have problems like this, where anything that isn't in direct sunlight is shaded wicked dark. So we do have a couple benefits. So I was right where the sun does shine through, because this is a one-sided material on the roof. The sun did shine through and cast shadows down here. So to fix that, you can place lights around the map. And I will place lights in certain areas, like over here. Here, we'll practice real quick. So if you don't, if you built lighting and you're like, okay, well now I can't work on the map because it's too dark, go to lit, go to unlit, and unlit will just show you everything with no lighting, just a flat matte viewport. So if I go to over here and I go to light, you have a couple options, but I'm looking for a point light or a spotlight. So these are the two lights you're going to want to place around the map if you need to place lighting at all. Also, I'm hitting the G key to go between game mode because there's a grid, if you can see, at 0 height, and sometimes I just don't like seeing that grid, so you hit the G key to go to game view, and that'll show you what it looks like in game. So game view will look like this. G key will then show all the widgets, so like our directional light, hitting the G key. So I want to place a point light right here on this light. Also, snapping is on, and I can't quite get it lined up with the light. So I'm going to go up here to grid snapping and turn it off so I can line that up good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it kind of like right here. Like I want it to be inside the building. I don't want to place it like down here. I want to be a little up here. And then you can see the attenuation radius if you zoom out and look like this. So that's how far this light will cast its rays. So for now, there's our reflection capture. So going back to our shiny metal, it's hard to see because this room was so dark. But now that I put a light in it, you can see the reflection capture of that light. And it will look even better once we build lighting again. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go over here, this. Again, I can just be lazy, click on this, override this to 256. We have a couple over here. So those are together, control click, those are together. Override these to 256. Now, the reason why that happened, I guess I should cover that. The reason why this happened is because the light map density was so low that it didn't know like what should be shaded and what should be not shaded. It didn't have enough resolution because these pieces are all in shadow. Again, our sun is over there and these are behind these giant silos. So it thought, oh, these need to be completely shaded. Like they need to be completely, like you can see a couple of the cross beams are not glowing. So the game thought, okay, those need to be completely dark. They're being shaded by the sun. Oh, you know why? Because part of these cut through this pipe. This piece right here cuts through the pipe, and so it's saying it's getting 0 light. So if some part of it gets 0 light, another part has to probably get 100 light because it just doesn't have the resolution to shade it, with a nice gradient. So what else? Is there anything else that's wicked shiny? For now, no. All right, so what else am I going to do? I'm going to make a couple other adjustments and then build lighting again. So you can go and place lights around the map like this one. But before I do that, there are a few other tricks to do. The first trick being deleting these. So this is what we would call a shadow caster. And so technically this building, when you go inside, has a roof. So what you want is, players that enter, if I H to hide, you want there to be like a shadow from the sun to cut through and kind of like as if you're entering a warehouse that actually does have a roof. Because the sun's going to shine through the top, I'm not so worried about that. So this was probably originally in Blender and then placed in CSGO as a shadow caster, so it was not visible to players, but it was a mesh that was used to calculate the light. So it would block light, but it wouldn't block, players or grenades or anything. I'm just going to delete it. I do not think that it is necessary, and I would rather just calculate lighting without it. So if I go over here, it looks like if I go to unlit, there's one in this doorway. I'm going to delete. There's one in this doorway. Now what I could do instead is find this material, browse to it, right click, asset actions, select actors using this asset. And this is going to select all the actors using that asset. And it says down here, it says 5 actors selected. I just want to make sure these are all shadow casters before I delete something that isn't. So I see 1 over there, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th one. This 5th one is like part of this little machinery thing. So what I might do is I might remove that one and just delete the rest. And go back into lit mode. So getting rid of the shadow casters. The next thing I'm going to do is go to lighting and go to my sky atmosphere. No, not sky atmosphere. Skylight. So in skylight, you'll have intensity scale and indirect lighting intensity. And under directional light, you'll also have intensity and indirect lighting intensity. So what I'm going to do on both of these is I'm going to bump intensity of skylight. So skylight is basically like just a giant, it just adds lighting to everything indiscriminately. Whereas, directional light, that's your sun. So if you relied on only directional light, then you would have, again, all these really hard shadows where it's like, okay, this should be lit. Like, it's daytime. There's no reason why this wouldn't be, plenty bright during the day. And so to get that sort of feel, I'm going to adjust skylight intensity. I'm going to bump it all the way up to 5 to start with, and then indirect lighting intensity. So scales the indirect lighting contributing from this light. Default value of 0 disables any indirect lighting, default's 1. So I'm going to bump this up to 5 as well. And again, you can play with these. You can adjust these numbers. It says it goes up to 6. You can manually type in numbers higher than that. So I'm going to go to 5 on just the intensity and indirect for skylight to start with. Just for skylight. And then I'm going to build lighting again. So we made the changes. We made the resolution of a couple things higher, the ones that were all shiny. We added a point light in that room with the reflection capture box just to see what that does. And then we upped the skylight intensity and indirect lighting intensity. And then we're going to compare and see what it looks like afterwards. And then make adjustments from there. And again, you can keep building lighting over and over and over and over again, making adjustments. But what I've found is that these are the adjustments that matter. So when I first started, I thought, wow, the map's dark. I got to go place point lights everywhere. You do not have to do that. There are much better and easier ways to get the map, brighter, especially if it's out in a desert during the day like this. And you don't want to have to worry about placing a bajillion point lights everywhere, which also isn't too great for performance. If they're set to static, they bake the lighting on, so it's no big deal, but again, it just wouldn't look good if you just placed a million point lights everywhere, because you would see all those point lights in the final bake, it just wouldn't look good and it would take forever. Every time you build lighting after the first time will go quite a bit faster. Again, what affects the lighting time is your CPU, but also the light map resolution of everything, and you know, preview versus. Okay, hang on, it hasn't loaded in yet. Okay, so you see now the map looks really bright. So I might have gone a little too high on the skylight and indirect lighting intensity. So everything looks a little more washed out. Looks pretty good though. And now look at our little room over here with our point light. Not bright enough. So we'll make some adjustments. Now that this door is open, okay, still pretty dark in here. It's a little better. Like right here, it used to be like pitch black. Let's go over and check over here where I was talking about earlier. So again, see, I said right here, I said, well, it wouldn't, this shouldn't look pitch black. So this, it did help right here. You know, made it a little brighter. So, but it could be a little brighter. So let's see. All right, in here doesn't look too bad, you know. You walk in, it's kind of funny because yeah, you can tell, hey, like why is it so bright in here? That's because the light is shining right through the ceiling because it's a one-sided material. The question is any players going to notice? Probably not. So here's another trick. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I've got map geometry. I'm going to make a new folder and call it static props. I'm going to go into map geometry and I'm going to look for, so everything in Blender was named. So grind displacement. So displacement is your real map geometry. And I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find static props. Okay, so here's our static prop. So I'm going to type in prop. I'm going to drag this over so I can see a little better. So now I have everything prop dynamic. Okay, that's a tumbleweed. I'm going to add another folder. Dynamic. And this is just all based on naming. So like ruins, everything was kind of named a little differently. And so I did this a little differently. So I have dynamic props, map geometry. So let's do, what I want is all the displacements in a different folder, but I'm going to pull everything else out. Static prop, static prop, static prop, static prop, static prop. A lot of static prop in world geometry. So I'm going to type in static prop. How is it called? Static underscore prop. Underscore prop. Static prop. And I'm going to scroll all the way down. Click on all these, right click, move to static props. Now I've got a separate folder for all the static props. All right, now I'm going to grab all the dynamic props and I'm going to move those to dynamic props. And I've got my cube of resizing. I'm gonna just delete that so I don't change any settings on that. Displacement, displacement. What are these? So there's a couple things in between. Function bomb target. This is some sort of bomb trigger. I don't know what it is, but it's CSGO related. I'm gonna delete it. Function brush. What is that? That is a mesh. Same thing with that. Those are info decal. What is this building? Info decal. So this is what I was saying. So any decals on the map, there was not as many on here. There was quite a few on ruins, but a lot of the decals end up rotating sideways. So if I go to this and then change this to a masked and then plug that into opacity mask, oh yeah, see, info decal, it's supposed to be a 2. So if you couldn't tell from decal, industrial number 02, this was supposed to be a 2. If I hit apply, it's unfortunately 90 degrees sideways. So there's only 2 of these on the entire map, and they are outside the playable area. You know, I don't even think you can see these 2s from in the playable area. So I'm just going to delete them. All right, so we got some overhang windows, some tumbleweeds, and then world geometry. So I'm going to put these tumbleweeds in these windows. I'm going to put the tumbleweeds into dynamic props. And then I'm going to put these windows into static props. All right, now I've got a couple different folders, and I'm going to go to map geometry and select all of these. So 7,000 pieces. Oh boy. Trying to think what the best way to do this is. Oh no, not 7,000 pieces, 1,400 selected. Okay, that's not so bad. So what I'm gonna do, 1,400 selected, I'm gonna bulk edit these. So the way to do that is, you know, however you want to select a bunch of things at once. I did it by just grabbing all the world geometry and displacements geometry out of the folder, and then I'm gonna hit Control B to browse. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna browse to all those assets at once. And it's quite a few of them, so it's gonna take a second. And before I do anything, I'm gonna save, because if I accidentally crash the editor doing this, I don't wanna lose anything. So I saved and it browsed to all the assets. So now it's got all these selected. I'm gonna right click, asset actions, bulk edit via property matrix. What that's gonna do is it's gonna pull up that same static mesh editor like I showed right here, but it's gonna pull up a viewport that'll let you edit everything at once. And so I'm just gonna go into the search bar and I'm gonna type in light, and I've got light map resolution. Now it's got multiple values because I did edit this one piece earlier, so this one's at 256. And what you can do is you can hit pin and sort by, and so you can see I have 2 displacements that I upped to 256, but the rest of them are all still 64. So I'm going to bump them all up to 128. Because I think I need just a little more light map resolution on a few of these things. And then I'm going to hit save. Again, this is going to increase my lighting from about 280 megabytes to maybe 400 or 500 megabytes. But when you package the map and send it to mod.io, it then compresses it down. So, you know, we'll see. If I have to adjust, you know, what I might do is I might grab all these ones I'm going to do that actually. I'm going to do that. So this is another way to do it. If I click on this piece over here out in the distance and I find the material and I browse to the material and I right click the material, I can asset actions, and instead of, edit or bulk edit, I can do select actors using this asset. And so now I've selected everything on the map using this material, which, as you can see, is all stuff that's outside of the map. So now I can do the same thing. I can control browse to those pieces, and I can right click, asset actions, bulk edit via property matrix, go back to light, and then drop these ones back down to 64 and save. So the next thing I'm going to do is go back to lighting, and I'm going to increase indirect lighting intensity. So I think the map's plenty bright enough. I actually might go back down on skylight. So I think intensity scale of 5 was a bit too bright. And did I change directional light? No, that was defaulted to 6. So I'm going to increase indirect lighting intensity to this one to maybe 8. And I know it changed the preview and it looks really bright, but this is just your indirect lighting bounce. So it's every piece of light is going to bounce a little bit more, but it won't increase the actual brightness. Again, I know it when you make it changing to the directional light, it kind of cancels your lighting build that you did before. So, and then I'm going to go to skylight, and intensity I lowered to 4, and indirect I'm going to go also to 8 on that. I'm going to hit save and build lighting again and see how it looks. Okay, so after changing the light map density and rebuilding lighting again, this is what we get. And so again, you see now that, anything in shadow doesn't look like it's like completely dark. It looks like it's, it's still daytime, but you do get that shadow over here. Inside the building, it's starting to look a little bit better. We still get a couple things from the ceiling, and I think I know what to do next to fix that. Out here, it doesn't look too bad. It looks a little dark in here. Over here, it's all right. Looks all right in here. I could go down. It does look a little bright. I think the original map, it was kind of like dusk. So I could lower the lighting intensity a little bit. And then over here, this is going to be a little tough getting this right. I want to see. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in the way. So let's start with this building first. So as we know, the roof is one-sided, so it doesn't cast a shadow. Now the other thing that's casting a shadow is these rafters. Okay, and this, in Blender, we split up. There's this, and this, and this, and this. And I just want to see what happens if I hide those. Okay, so if I just hit H and hide those, it kind of, gets rid of those for a second. So I'm going to also grab these. Maybe not those. This thing. Oh boy, is that like a whole separate piece? Yeah. This, and this catwalk, this. So if I keep, hitting control click and adding things, and then hiding and unhiding, I can grab all these pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all those pieces, and I'm going to control B to browse to them, right click, asset actions. Actually, it might be here. I might be able to do it here. under lighting. Okay, cast shadow. Controls whether the primitive component should cast a shadow or not. I'm going to uncheck that for all of these pieces right here, because I just want daylight to just shine through the top of this factory without, you know, casting any shadows down. Like, I want it to just, you know, so if a player walks in here, it just looks like it's daylight, even if it's underneath a building's roof. So I'm gonna do the same thing over here. It looks like there's some cross beams that are getting shadows cast. So these, yeah, that whole thing right there. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna uncheck cast shadow on this piece. And I wonder if there's anything else around the map. Now, I could do that with this building. I think it might end up looking bad because there's so many pieces above this. I would have to make none of those cast shadow for it to have light finally make its way all the way down to the bottom. So down here, we are going to add some point lights and some spotlights. So I'm going to go to unlit, and what is this right here? This is called Quarry Exterior Light Fixture. Okay, so we're going to have light emanating from right here. So I'm going to grab a point light, and I need to be in game mode to see it. And I'm going to place it right there. And let's look at the attenuation radius. So it will go about this big. I'm going to scoot it out a little more. And then intensity. If I remember correctly, the default intensity is way too low. And as we saw over here, you know, with this light, like that's the intensity of that light. So I'm going to select both of these at the same time. And I'm going to change the intensity on these to maybe 12. And then the indirect lighting intensity, that's like one of the most important things. So that's, I don't know if it's exactly how many times the light bounces, but that's a fair way to think about it, is how many times the light bounces before it dies off when calculating lighting. So again, I used 5 for a lot of things. And you can see how that kind of changed it. Well, it won't go back now, but if I bump that up to 5, maybe scoot that over a little. This one, scoot that over a little. And I want to add 1 on each of these. Now, Unreal doesn't like it if you have too many point lights overlapping. So if I grab a ton of these and move them out, you can see that eventually it's like not happy with it. And so anyone with an X right there is basically saying, hey, you have too many overlapping. This one might have problems. So future impervious here, I just wanted to clear up a misconception. Something I wasn't aware of at the time when I recorded that is if you have too many point lights overlapping, it will give you this little error and say that these ones won't be casting shadows because you have too many overlapping lights. What I found out is that that is because they're set to stationary by default. A movable light will be fully dynamic and render in real time. Static lighting will be fully baked. Stationary light will be baked, but it will still allow dynamic shadows on movable objects, such as the player pawn. So to resolve this, if you need more point lights in an area, you can just set them to static, and they just won't cast a shadow on the player pawn, which isn't, you know, the biggest deal in the world. So if you need more point lights or spotlights in an area, just set them to static, and that will allow you to have more than one overlapping in a tight area. So I'm gonna grab 1 more, and again, I recommend, you know, watching some other Unreal tutorials first, but I'm using Alt, holding Alt and clicking to grab another one. Putting that one there, and then I'm gonna go to unlit just to see, okay, there's another one there. Any lights over here? There's one right there, so I'm gonna grab this one and drag it over here. this way a hair and out a hair. It's pretty good. Looks like there's another one on this side. See, now this one, it's not happy because there's a light over there, there's a light right there, there's a light right there, and there's all those ones over there. So I'm gonna have to see, that one's not happy that there's that many lights. And neither is that one. So this one in the center right here, I might have to lower the attenuation radius to 500 so it doesn't quite go all the way over to there. And I wonder if I can fit one more now that I did that. You know, maybe I'll lower these two also to like 800. And see, now those ones aren't going so far as to overlap with this one. Looks like these are overlapping a little funny. All right, so let's build lighting again and see how it looks under here. And what I could do is find a spot up here. You know, another option is I've got a spotlight. And so spotlight is like more like that, and you can rotate it into different ways. So what you could do is find a spot up here to place the spotlight, and then maybe say like, hey, take this piece of pipe right here, all these pieces of pipe, and turn off cast shadows for those. So that way this light can shine through, and it will kind of just like shine through the ceiling and cover. You know, attenuation radius, turn that up so it like covers the whole room like that. But again, now a couple of those point lights are not happy. So for this scenario, because there's so much stuff up in the ceiling, like if it was just like an empty, like I don't even know why there's pipes up there because you can't see. Alrighty, now I built lighting again, and this tunnel, if I hit G to go into game mode, you know, you can see that, you know, these lights, you can tell kind of where the point light is on the light. Also, you can see the reflection capture from the light on the wall a little too, how it kind of changes angle when you go by it. Actually, this tunnel doesn't even have a reflection capture, it's just the entire map's reflection capture, but now this hallway looks pretty good. I was worried it would be a little too dark and I wouldn't have enough point lights, but you know, it's pretty good. So I mean, at least this was this hallway. I still got to do like maybe add one or two more in here. It looks like if I go to unlit, yeah, there's a light right there, so I could add a point light to that. Make sure it's not overlapping and conflicting with any of these ones out here, but I think it should be fine. This one's doing pretty good. Also, I know, like I could switch over to CSGO right now, but I know that there is a red light down here. So what I want to do is add a point light right here, hit G, and make sure it's not conflicting with anything. No X's anywhere, okay. And I know that like on the original grind map, you could come over here and you could see down this tunnel, and there was a red warning light on this one right here. So what I'm going to do is I want to re-add that. I want to make it, you know, faithful. Also, you know, it needs a little bit more light in this corner. You can see how dark it is. You know, someone could stand in that corner and hide. So I'm going to go and add this, and I'm going to change the light color, and I'm going to change it to red. Let's get a good, nice red, right, somewhere between orange, right there. And then again, what did I have the intensity on these? Intensity 12. This one, I'll maybe leave at 8 intensity because it's kind of just like a little, like soft light. But I do want to change indirect lighting intensity all the way up to 5. And for the rest of these, what I might do, and again, I can go over here and close all these tabs. So now I got all these point lights. I might bump indirect lighting intensity up on these just by 1 more. I think it needs to be just a hair brighter in here. So I bump them up to 6, then it should just brighten it up just a tiny bit more. So let's go check out that building, because we still haven't looked over here at this building ever since I, you know, and now that looks pretty darn good. It's still a little dark over in this corner, but again, that was from making it so none of these things up here casted shadows, that now we don't have a bajillion like catwalk shadows covering all over this. What I can do is look at the original map and see where the sun angle was. Maybe I, you know, can change the angle of the sun to be a bit more downward, so it's not casting a shadow sideways on everything. You know, that's up to, you know, if you want it to look like the original map or not. Looks like we need a little bit more lighting in here, so we'll do the same thing. I'm gonna grab one of these lights because the settings are correct. 1006, yeah. Alt, and then I'm gonna drag it over and place it in there, and then I'm gonna zoom in on it with F and place this right here on that light. And there are some lights on the ceiling. So what I might do is I'll use a spotlight for those. Oops. So I'm gonna use a spotlight. So I'm gonna drag out a spotlight. And again, this is for all these lights on the ceiling up here. Rather than placing a million point lights all over all of them, I'm just gonna use one spotlight. So I'm gonna drag it up to about there. If I drag it up anymore, it's gonna hit that and cast a shadow against those. So that looks pretty centered to this room. I'm going to take the, there's inner cone angle, and when it's set to 0, it doesn't use the inner cone. And then outer cone angle. So you can either set an inner cone, and so you can say like, okay, I want the outer cone to be this big, but the inner cone to be, you know, this big, to say, hey, most of the light should be in the inner cone, and then just a little bit of light should be in the outer cone. Or you can just leave the inner cone as 0 and just say, hey, make it uniform across the whole thing. Because I'm not lining this up with a particular light fixture, I guess I won't use an inner cone. And then again, you want your attenuation radius, so that might be a little too steep. You want your attenuation radius to be big enough that it hits the ground. So again, I made this so big that it's kind of tough to see, but I want this angle right here to just impact the ground. Now I wonder if this went over into my building over here and caused any overlap issues, because I did make that pretty big. Oh yeah, it's not happy about that. So I'm gonna reset that, and I'm gonna make that hit the ground right there, and I'm gonna increase the outer cone angle just a little bit. Okay. And maybe what I'll do is, maybe it's better to have a couple. Maybe I bring the cone in and I put one here and another one over here. I'll have 2 in this room. And I'm gonna select both of them at the same time. And I think I need to bring the cone out just a little bit more, 55 degrees. Okay, that looks pretty good. Attenuation radius, let's go 1100. And then again, intensity, I want it at around 12, and then indirect lighting intensity, 6. All right, and we'll see how that looks when we build lighting again. And how about over here? So again, like this room, it's not too dark right here. Not too dark over here. You can see out there pretty good. It's a little dark right here. So maybe what I'll do is I'll add another spotlight right here. And I will move it to right about here, and I'm going to angle it this way a little so it casts its light over this way. Let's set this on to 12. Indirect lighting intensity, set it to 6. Didn't encounter with any of these. All right, now how's this building over here? This building is very bright. Holy moly. Okay, so I've been working on lighting. I wanted to get it really good. I learned a few things, made a few changes. So I want to go over all of those. So I was having trouble, first of all, I was having trouble figuring out how skylight was working because I was making changes to skylight and it seemed like nothing was happening. Especially in this room inside the building, I was getting like a hard line of a shadow right here in this corner that I couldn't get rid of. My assumption was that skylight illuminated the entire map so you could like have everything be lit. Like it just automatically made everything light up, regardless if it was inside or outside or which direction the directional light was shining. And that directional light was your sun that shined down and hit a building and things at specific angles and made shadows like this, where it's like clearly all the shadows in this map are cast in a similar direction to make it believable. Skylight still exists outside. The light source still comes from the sky, but I guess the way to think about it is it's a bunch of lights. It's as if there was a bunch of directional lights, all like tiny ones, shining down in different directions outside to illuminate their outside scene. So I was able to build lighting a few times where it kind of looked like really overcast, like it was like the sun was setting, the sun was like, you know, had set over the mountains, but it was still kind of bright out, kind of deal. But still, inside the building, it was wicked dark. And so finally, I discussed with someone else and realized that's not exactly what skylight does. You still need lights inside the building. So just to go over some settings, what I ended up leaving on is directional light. I had at an intensity of 4 with an indirect light intensity of 4. And skylight I had at an intensity of 5 and indirect lighting intensity at 6. And then I just left it there. And I still had the shadow in this building, like completely, this whole corner was dark. You couldn't see anything. And then I discussed and found out that you do need to use more spotlights if you're working inside of a building. So what I did is first, I made the roof of this building two-sided. So I went into the material and I checked the box for two-sided. That then blocks the light from coming in to the roof of the building and, you know, creating like daylight inside. You don't want it to be daylight inside of a building. I mean, that was the lazy way to do it. Same thing with this building over here. It's using the same two-sided material. So it was as if the light was just shining right through the roof. This is what it looked like when it's not two-sided. The light would just shine right into the building. And it would cast shadows. And the sun doesn't cast shadows inside of a building. You do have these right here, which is the windows. These ones right here, these are one-sided, so the light does shine through this and cast these light spots right here. But that's not enough to illuminate the building. So then what I had to use is spotlights. So what I did instead was, you know, in this building there's these overhead lights, and so I placed a spotlight on a lot of them, not every single one, but I hung a bunch of spotlights and I adjusted the intensity. These ones, I cranked up the intensity pretty high, all the way up to 100. And then I brought the attenuation radius so it was just below the floor. So just peaking just below the floor. And then set the inner and outer cone. And so the inner and outer cone will help it from having like a hard line where the outer cone hits the wall and just completely, you know, one outside the radius, it's completely shaded, and inside the radius, it's light. So just these are the settings I used, about, 58 degrees on the outer cone, 41 degrees on the inner cone. And then I just put a bunch of them inside the building. And then when I built lighting, again, it blocked the sun. And then this lighting is all just from the spotlights. And the spotlights are pretty good to work with. You can actually adjust these settings in real time, and it will kind of show you the preview of what it's going to look like. It'll light up the wall as you adjust the settings, so you can see like, hey, how bright is it going to be? But you absolutely need to crank up the intensity. If you don't, it's barely going to do anything. So just that's the solution. You use spotlights. If you have areas where it's dark and it's clear that the sun isn't hitting it, just use some spotlights. And then I think I also put the indirect lighting intensity to 5, and so again, that'll just make it so the light will bounce a little bit, and so even though it's pointing straight down, it still alights above the light just a little bit. So that is the solution for lighting that I came up with, because again, I was just struggling to have this corner lit from the skylight or the spotlight. What else? So here's the other thing. I'll have to build lighting and show you, but Unreal doesn't like flat planes. This roof right here is just a completely flat piece of geometry, and it's one-sided. So, it's this roof right here. So when I built lighting, on one side it was lit inside the building on the main face, and on the outside it just would never shade properly. It would just go completely black. So there's 2 solutions around that. So I'm going to build lighting and show you. So now that I built lighting, this is the problem I was having, where these faces of this building and that roof over there just don't want to have any lighting baked to them. Now the inside looks fine. It's this one right here. It's the entire corrugated metal on the roof, but the other side doesn't want to bake. I've looked up, there's a couple different options under lighting, light mask settings. It's use 2-sided lighting. If true, object will be treated as if it receives lights from both sides of its polygons. I tried checking that, that didn't work. I've tried upping the light map resolution to 4K, that didn't work. So at this point, I was stumped on how to get it to look correct. Now, from what I found out, that a flat plane like this, it's not gonna light properly, because again, it was originally designed in Blender to be one-sided see-through. There might be a way to fix it. The way I found out to fix it is either bake the lighting 2-sided, and I'm going to try both options. Either bake the lighting 2-sided, then go into the material, uncheck 2-sided, hit apply, and then go back to the map. And now it's just one-sided like it was originally, where inside the building it's covered, you can see the roof. Outside the building it's see-through like it originally was. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is to go to override light map resolution and just change it. And when you change it, it unbakes that piece of metal, or that material. And I think I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna save and I'm gonna upload the map, and I'll confirm. I think this will upload looking like this. So all of these, I can just change them to 256. And this one over here. And I believe if I just save this and upload it like this, that it will upload, because the lighting is baked onto everything else. And so these will just act as if, you know, they're not baked, and they should just look like this. So that's what I'm hoping. So those are the two options. It's either to bake the lighting and then change it to one-sided, or bake the lighting and then click on those and then change the light map resolution. And I think I was going to do this for this piece of metal over here too, because look, this is a really big piece of metal. So this one I probably could have fixed by upping the light map resolution. It's at 128. So I probably could have bumped this one up to like 512 or even, you know, 1024. And that one might have baked fine, but I'm going to do the same trick. I'm just going to change the light map resolution. And so basically right now it's like unlit. And I'm going to try uploading it and seeing if that is a solution to get around something that won't bake the lighting on its surface. And it's only because this is a giant flat plane. Everything else on the map, you know, even the smaller pieces baked fine. And like this one, it's kind of one-sided on a lot of places, so light can get in. And then this one, it was like fully covered. So it kind of had a bit of a problem. But let's see if that fixes the issue. Again, you just got to do the best you can with this sort of thing. You know, I don't know the right way to go about doing this, but this is just what I have for like little tricks. And I think this piece too needed a change. Yep. All right. I'll upload and see if in-game it looks like this. That. So now that we did all that, I know we changed the light map resolution on a few different things. And so now the lighting build data is 400 megabytes, which will get compressed like probably by half. So when you upload this to Mod.io, that'll probably be half the size. So all of the assets in the folder, here's how to check that. In UGC content, I can right click on the UGC content folder and go to size map. And then this will bring up a size map of all of the assets in this folder. And so it says lighting build data is 419 megabytes. And then the total says at least 1.5 gigabytes. And so we've got a couple things here, like the dump truck BM that are 40 megabytes, and T Sky Blue, ground dirt, dump truck B. So let's find this. I think, oops, no. I wonder if there's, yeah, browse to asset. All right. So 21, 21, 21. So I know from, you know, when I was fixing all these textures that I like re-imported a bunch of them. And so it looks like we have doubles of a few. So what you can do is, you know, you can go to size map and just see how big. It said 1.5 gigabytes, but I bet the final upload and download to Mod.io will probably be around 800 megabytes. It normally halves it. So for 800 megabytes for a Pavlov map is not too shabby. I can reduce this by getting rid of some unnecessary textures. And so what I can do is click on this texture and do asset actions, select actors using this asset. And this one says no actors found. This one, if I right click asset actions, select actors using this asset, no actors found. This one, right click asset actions, select actors using this asset, no actors found. Okay, that's really weird. Then what the heck is the dump truck using? Because I know it's using this texture. No, it's using V dump truck A, which is this material. Asset actions, select actors using this asset. Okay, so all these dump trucks are using this material, which is right here. And if I browse to asset in the browser, it brings me to what? Where is it? Let me try that again. V dump truck AM. Oh, right here. This one. So this dump truck is using V dump truck AM, but then these ones over here are V dump truck B. So I don't know what the difference is between these materials. V dump truck B. So the wheels are using V dump truck B. And if I browse to asset, okay, see it says it's this one right here. Oh no, what did I just? It says it's this one right here. But again, when I selected this and did asset actions, select actors using this asset, it said no actors found. But it is this material right here, which the wheels and the bed of the dump truck are using. And there are 6 things using it, and they are using V dump truck B M NCL1, which is this one. I don't think either of these 2 on right here are being used. So if I click delete on these, oops, and I do delete asset referencing the pending deleted asset, V dump truck tires. Okay, so let's go to V dump truck tires. Is using V dump truck BM, but this one's using BM NCL1, and this is like something to do with how it exported from Blender. So this one, I can change it to M and hit apply, and now these are both using the same material. And if I go back to here and click on the copies and hit delete, oh, it's pending because I didn't save. So now if I save, now not every map uses 4K textures. So when I did Ruins, there was no 4K textures on the entire map, but whoever made this map originally used a 496 by 496 PNG for the dump truck, which is a very big, again, you can see when you open up size map that these are 23 megabyte textures, which is huge. So if I click on these and hit delete, now there is no asset using those textures, and I can hit force delete. And then save, and then again, I can go back to UGC, click on size map, and see, it's still 1.5 gigabytes it says, but I mean, that got rid of 50 megabytes, and you do this enough, and you can probably shave off like 200-300 megabytes. There is an easier way to do this. Instead of doing this, you can migrate the entire map, which I will do at the very end, and I think that will get rid of a couple 100 megabytes of unnecessary textures. Again, I will cover that a little bit later. So what's next? Let's pull up my notes. So we resized, I showed you how to resize the map and find the correct size with the NATO skin. And then we skipped over to lighting, light map resolution. We covered light map density. Again, going into lit, optimization view modes, and light map density. So now that I changed a couple things, I could now go back and say like, okay, this is red, this piece right here, and it's set to 64. So like, I could click on these, and then this piece, and this piece, and this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, not that piece. I could go by hand and I could click on all of these and override the light map resolution and change them to 32. And now they're not all red, some of them are orange. So this one, like override light map resolution, change it to 32. And now it's green. And so what you'd want to do is go through the entire map and say like, hey, this is using up 64 light map resolution, but this is just a tiny piece of pipe way outside the map, not even in the playable area. All these over here, this, whatever this piece is, these were included in the one that I changed to 128 earlier. So these could go back all the way down to 32. If you want to really optimize your map and like make a good product, you know, it is worth the time. It is always worth the time and effort to go through and find all these things and say like, hey, this piece, whatever this building is right here, you know, there's all these different pieces of metal. I don't know why these aren't merged. And they're all using 128 light map resolution. It is worth going through and bumping all these back down to 32 because these are just flat rectangles. They don't, and they're not that big. They don't need to have a light map resolution of 128. And you can get that light map build data from 400 megabytes back down to like 300, 250. You know, it does get compressed later, but it all adds up. You know, rather than downloading a 1.5 gigabyte map, most people would rather download a 500 megabyte map. It is worth the time to spend doing this to lower the file size for everyone else that ends up downloading it in the future. And it doesn't take that long. Like you can maybe spend an hour and go through, you know, and click on everything that's red. And again, that's what it's showing you. It's saying it's red because hey, it's like it doesn't need to be this dense. You know, click on these pieces and override the light map resolution and go down to 32 on all these. You know, like this little piece of fence post is at 64, so it could be 32. Even this piece, the leg, oh no, so the leg is part of it. It just has a different polygon topology, so that's why it's showing. I think the squares like line up with the polygons or something. I'm not entirely sure. And going through the whole map and making sure there's no red, you know, like clicking on this one saying, okay, this doesn't need to be 128, this can be 32. It's just a little tiny piece that players step on. It's definitely definitely not fun staring at all like the glitching. Like I don't know why the light optimization view mode does this where it just glitches all over the place. If you sit still, it does stop moving. So it is what it is. All right, that's for now, you know, the best I can do when it comes to explaining lighting and to the best of my knowledge. I will link a couple videos in the description that go over lighting a little more in depth if you want to learn a little bit more but for doing a basic map port, that's the main things you need. So like, yeah, we covered building lighting, the file size, the skylight, the sky atmosphere, point lights, the light mass importance volume, you need one of those, reflection capture boxes. Let's take a look at that reflection capture now that we got the lighting in here. So yeah, see, you know, look at, if I can pan the camera slow, like look at that reflection capture. There isn't much going on in this room because it's just a little tiny room. But that's what happens when you add a box reflection capture into a room like this with materials that do have, you know, like a 0.5 roughness value or lower, that are maybe metallic or, you know, like a water texture. Gets you something like that where it's like, yeah, that looks, you know, that looks pretty nice. They look like nice shiny lockers. You know, you don't want to make something like this jumper suit have reflections because it's not metallic or smooth or shiny. But if I deleted this box reflection capture and only kept the one that was on the entire map, the one that, I think it's this one right here, that covers the entire map, you wouldn't get that. You wouldn't get this shininess on these because each box reflection capture can only store a certain amount of data. Just like the light map resolution on everything, each box reflection capture stores its own reflections. And so, like, if you really wanted to like make a production level game, you would take those box reflection captures and you would put one in like every hallway or every room. Like you'd put another one in this room and make it encompass the entire room, and you'd put like another one, you know, in this room and maybe another one in this hallway right here, and like each area that you want reflection captures to be captured even, even prettier, you would put an extra reflection capture. But for a CSGO map, one is enough to cover the whole map. We covered editing multiple things at once. So again, if you want to, I think that's the next thing I'm going to cover. So to speed up the workflow, I already showed you a couple different things where, all this quarry pieces, I can click on one, I can browse to the material, and then I can right click on the material and asset actions select actors using this asset. And so now I've selected 210 pieces that are using this material. I can do two things. I can then either Control B to browse to those, and then right click asset actions bulk edit via property matrix. So that's one way I can then go through all these settings that you would normally find in a single piece if by opening the static mesh editor. The other way, what's the other way I normally use? That's the main way. That's the main way we're going to be using. But like you can also do it kind of like the opposite. You can also find, a material in here and say like, okay, carpet O2, and then click it, asset actions, select actors using this asset, and see like, okay, there's only one piece on this entire map that's using carpet. So it's just a way to find and select and edit a lot of things at once, because the next couple steps are going to involve editing a lot of things at once. So that's important to know. And then now we're going to go back up to optimization, collision, and phys materials. So there's a few things I'm going to go over that are very important, all kind of at the same time. And so the first one is going to be player collision. So right now you see the map, you see what it's supposed to look like. But that doesn't mean if you played on this map right now, that is what the player would run into, like all these objects. To see that, you go up to lit and player collisions. And as it is right now, this is what the map thinks it looks like. Is this, which is not what the player would walk on, so it's like this isn't even remotely correct. So we're going to go back to lit view mode. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to first tidy up my workspace by moving all the lights into lighting, all the spotlights into lighting, and then I'm going to select I wish this folder was in a different order. There we go. I sorted by type. So now map geometry, static props are all in a line, and I can shift select all of them. All right. Save, because this might crash the editor trying to edit 7,000 pieces at the same time. Control B to browse to all 7,000 assets at the same time. Okay, it actually found them. So let's right click, asset actions, bulk edit via property matrix. Okay, it actually opened it up. So maybe before I do this, I will look at one single piece. So we looked at this piece of floor earlier and saw that, it looks like this from what we merged in Blender. I can go to lit player collisions and it looks like this, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to generate a collision to the best of its ability using the polygons that exist. And so I can also instead do show, you can like show vertices to see how many, vertices are on the mesh. I'm going to go to show. So if you show bounds, that's another thing. So it's like showing the physical bounds of the object that the engine calculates. And then I can show simple and complex collision. So simple collision, I'm just going to show that for now. Shows up like this. It takes the object and it says, hey, I'm going to use as little polygons possible to draw something that represents this material in 3D space. And so it has to go over here and grab this piece, grab all these pieces, and then this has some depth because it's got this sideways piece and this one's a little lower. So it's trying to grab all these pieces and draw a simple mesh around it to the best of its ability using the least amount of polygons possible. What we want instead is we want to use complex collision. Now, complex collision uses every single vertice on the object and just draws it exactly like the object is. The only problem with that is if you use this for too many objects, like your entire map, it can cause performance impacts. So I've been told. It's the it's the simple and incorrect way to do it. But for something like this, it's a flat plane. There aren't too many vertices. There's only 72. It's not the biggest deal in the world. So what you would do on a single mesh is open that mesh up, and then you would scroll down to collision. And under collision presets, it's set to block all by default, and collision complexity says project default. We're going to go down to use complex collision as simple. If I click that and then go to player collision, now you see it changed the player collision from this to this, which now matches the mesh perfectly. So I'm going to set this to project default. I'm going to close this asset because I have 7,000 of them open in the bulk editor, which again is the same exact thing as that other page. It's just shown a little differently. Unfortunately, you can't find that. It might be under something else, but I've always had trouble finding that just by going through. Maybe it's under, okay, so it's under static mesh body setup collision complexity. What I normally just do is I go to the search bar and type in COLL for collision. Okay, static mesh body setup. And then collision complexity, project default, use complex collision as simple. And now it's going to change 7,000 static meshes all at once to use complex collision as simple, which again might crash your editor. So if you have to do this in smaller batches, okay, that wasn't so bad. I'm going to hit save and save all 7,000 meshes. Okay, that wasn't so bad. It changed all of them at once. And now I can close some of these tabs. Go back to the map, unselect everything. All saved. Now, if we go back to lit player collision, you'll see that now the player collision looks like it's supposed to for the entire map. Players can walk through here, walk along here, walk everywhere they need to be. But if you'll notice, there's a couple things that you probably don't want collision for, like this grass. Otherwise, if a player walks over this piece of grass, they're going to bump into it, and that's not going to feel very good. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit a lot of things at once. So for this game, each of these pieces of dead grass like when they originally made this map, they probably used the same piece. So like this piece of grass and this piece of grass were probably the same static mesh, but the exporter tool from Blender names them something different. So we have dead grass prop 370 and dead grass prop 371, 372, 373. These are all the exact same mesh, but they named them in the editor differently, which is really unfortunate because they are technically the same mesh, and there's a little bit more optimization we could do if they were the same mesh. There's a second way of optimizing without that, which we will go over in this video when I do the last pass of optimization towards the end. So I don't want collision on this grass, so I'm going to click on this dead grass, and I wonder if this uses the same material. It does, so that's nice that I can click on this dead grass. I'm going to browse to asset, click the material, asset actions, select actors using this asset. There's 100 pieces of dead grass around the map that are all using this same material. I'm going to Control B to browse to them. Right click, asset actions, bulk edit via property matrix, type in collision, collision complexity. If I just changed it back to project default, what'll end up happening is, oh, not unlit, player collision. It's gonna use that simple collision, and it's gonna make them like look like, you know, like this, where I showed you earlier. It's going to grab the bounds of the object and try its best guess to develop its own collision. So instead, what we want to do is get rid of collision. So that is under collision profile name. Even if you go right here to collision enabled and change it to no collision, it's still going to have this simple collision box. What collision enabled is for physics engine specific things, not for player interactions and other things. So they're kind of like two separate. Collision enabled up here is more for like blueprint sort of stuff. This collision is for a different type. And so I will show you what those are by clicking on one piece of grass. I can click on this one piece of grass and I can scroll down, and collision shows up here as well. Collision presets, default, custom, no collision, block all. So it's set to default, and the default is block all. So even if it says default, the default for this project, for the Pavlov mod kit, is set to block all. So I can find the same thing if I hit Control E and open up the static mesh editor for this piece of grass. I can scroll down to collision, and you get the exact same settings. And under this one, it says collision preset. It says block all, whereas over here, it didn't say that. It said default. So what we want to do is we want to change it from block all to no collision. So we don't want any collision for the player. We don't want grenades to hit the grass. You know, we don't want any collision. Now this is a drop-down menu, which is nice, but under the bulk edit via property matrix, it doesn't give you a drop-down. So you have to type in no collision. No collision. You have to type in no collision yourself. And then save. And if I go back to the map, you can now see that all the grass is gone under player collision. And if I go to my grass static mesh that I had open, the single one, it's now set to no collision because this was under the bulk edit. It edited that one. So now I can close the grass, and now I've got these little pebbles that I don't want players stepping on. So I can scroll up, search for the material it uses. search for the material it uses. Oh, right here. Asset actions. Select all actors using this asset. 136. So, what is nice is that, it does, all of these pebbles aren't just one mesh. They are kind of like a group. But still, 136 groups of pebbles all over the entire map. Control B to browse to all of those pebble groups. Right click on one of the ones that it selected, bulk edit via property matrix, go to collision, type in collision, change the preset from block all to no collision. Save. And now all of those are gone. We want the palette to have collision. We want, and you just look around the map and see, is there anything that the player might bump into that you think they shouldn't be bumping into? This chain on the ground, you could edit that chain. I might leave that. What is this? This is one of those tumbleweeds. I'm gonna do those later. This wire on the ground, like, do you really want players to be bumping into the electrical cable on the ground? 18 selected, so there's a bunch of wire cables on the outside of the map over here. There's a couple hanging on the buildings. Really, there's only like this one. There's one under the map. But still, I think it's worth, again, just making it so the player is not bumping onto a million different things. Going into this, looking for collision, changing from block all to no collision, saving. So I guess the next collision thing we want to talk about is here, staircase. That'll be a good one. So players may or may not be able to walk up this staircase. It really depends on how big it is, whether or not the game thinks, oh, that's a curb that a player can reasonably step up on. And then you walk up the staircase and your character goes up left, up left, up left, up left. If you're trying to shoot as you go like strafe sideways up this staircase, or if you're trying to throw a grenade or anything while walking up that staircase, it's gonna not be a fun time walking up that staircase like that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to place actors and we're gonna go to blocking volume. And we're gonna drag it out. And if you can't see the blocking volume, it's because you're in game mode and it's hidden. I do that a lot, where I think, where the heck did my blocking volume go? But I was in game view. So we're gonna take this cube and we're gonna drag it to like the center of the stairs and then hit R to go to scale, and I'm gonna scale it down flat. And then I'm going to make it wider and then scoot it over so this one's pretty good. It lines up nicely between the stairs. Scoot it over a little more, make it a little longer, and then rotate. And I've got snap rotation on, and so I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to rotate, and then I will line my camera up like this and drag it to there. And so now we have a staircase that players can walk up, but I want to line this up a little better. It needs to be a little longer. And then what I like to do is make sure it goes into the ground just a little bit, so that way players can walk up it like a ramp. And then I zoom into the top up here while still being able to see the widget, so I can grab it and line it up with the top like that. And that's good enough. Like, players will be able to walk up that. No one's going to notice if there's the tiniest little bump, right there. No one's going to notice that. And so there you go. That's how you fix a staircase. Now over here, this one's subjective. Like, you might be able to feel that if you step up on it, but why not? For the sake of this, I'm gonna, click on this one right here, hit Alt to grab and drag another one in. Rotate it around. I want it to be good, so I'm going to type in 180 by hand. Scale it this way. Maybe one bigger. Scale it this way. line it up with the stairs. Let's be a little wider. And then again, I'm gonna kind of go sideways so I can grab the widget right here and then move it down and figure out where that stair, tippy top of the stair is. And I'm gonna go down a little more. Right there. Actually, up just a hair more. So it looks like this one actually needs to be angled a little bit shallower. Right there. All right, now when players walk up that, they're gonna get a nice little smooth ramp. Little bump in the stairs right there, a little bump in the door frame right there. Go around the map, see if there's anything else. So the next thing you'd want to do is make sure your players can't get outside the map. So, you know, people will definitely be able to find a way to get up that jersey barrier by like walking into it funny. So you want to take a blocking volume, drag it out to here, move it over, make it really wide. And this is up to you. I think, you know, I don't want to add too many blocking volumes because I want players to be able to play other game modes on this. And if any of those other game modes have like a jump mechanic, I still want them to be able to kind of jump up over this. I just don't want search and destroy players to be able to walk up this wall. So what I'll do is I'll scoot this out to about here. So that way I know, you know, no one's going to walk up any of these. Scoot that over just a little bit. And I'll probably leave it about this high. Maybe I'll bring it down to like just an inch over the jersey barrier. So now I know it's like no one, scoot it out a little more. No one's gonna walk up the side of one of these. So you might be able to get up this wheel right here, you know, maybe. So maybe I'll scoot it out just a little bit more. You know, will someone, you know, now I'm thinking like, okay, someone's definitely going to be able to walk over and scoot their way up that corner right there. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab another one to do that rather than rotate it. All right, now no one's walking up that cone. There we go. You know, and then in game, it will, like in lit mode, it will show up. You can see there's just a little tiny line right there to represent the blocking volume. And go back to player collision, go around. Okay, there's definitely someone's going to figure out a way to get, sometimes it places the blocking volume in a funny spot. Players are definitely going to be able to figure out how to do that. So let's take that and put that right there. And I know on the Unreal Engine 4 version, people were able to get behind here, so I'll do the same thing. I'm gonna maybe take this one and rotate it sideways, lower it, and just put it up just enough that no one can walk over it. Just up a little higher. Will people be able to walk up that sandbag, get up on the wheel, get up on that, walk up that ladder? Who knows? All right, where else around the map can players get to? So they might be able to walk up on top of that and get over there. I'm gonna leave it for now. We'll see if anyone's able to do that. Over here's looks pretty good. No one's getting out of the map over there. Now these, you know, it's like players definitely will be able to walk up this right here. So I might have to put an entire blocking volume covering all these fences right here. This one right here, this is T-spawn. Put a blocking volume right here. There we go, covering that whole thing. How about over here? Anyone getting out over here? Yeah, so this right here, players can definitely walk up this slant and just walk out over there. So definitely gonna need a blocking volume right here. Maybe I'll put one that goes like this and make this wicket tall. And angle it this way. Move it out here. Angle it a little more. That looks pretty good. Pull it out just a little bit farther. Now players won't be able to, walk up and get out of the map over there. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be in the game of walking over here and standing right here. So what I can do is I'm going to reference CSGO. So let's load up CSGO. All right, I'm going to put a blocking volume there, but I'm going to make sure you can still use the cover. Okay, so as far as blocking volumes go, this map is pretty much done. Ruins, I had to put so many blocking volumes, probably about 100 of them around the map, because there was just so much natural geometry that players could just walk over and get out of the map. So for this one, I blocked off this box right here, so you can still hide behind it, but you can't go up and cheese up behind this and stand here for cover. I'll leave it up here so you can still kind of walk up this wall and hug that wall. But again, as far as blocking volumes go, this map really didn't need that many. There isn't anywhere else to get out of the map because it is already so, like a boxy industrial map that, oh, actually right here. So I got to do right here still. But in the meantime, I'm going to close all these folders. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another folder and call it blocking volumes. And I'm going to take all my blocking volumes and I'm going to move into there. And so again, it's really important to stay organized because if you just have a bunch of things over in the outliner that are just all in not a folder at all, it does get pretty hectic pretty fast. So I'll add some blocking volumes to that fence later, but for now I want to move on to the next topic.